Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 7910, offered by Mr.
Without
Massie.
objection, the amendment will be considered as read. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I offer this amendment sincerely, and I want to explain some of my motivation for offering it. We think a lot about our active military who are deployed overseas and, putting their lives on the line and pausing their personal development, their careers, in order to protect this country. But too often we don't think about their families at home. And in the case of, for instance, the wife at home who's taking the kids to the doctor, who's paying the bills, paying the mortgage, getting the yard mowed, fixing the car, basically, in many ways, operating not just like a single mom, but taking care of the military member's business as well, affairs, while he is deployed. And it occurs to me, and this is the case, that a lot of people who enlist in the military, they start their lives early. They get married early. It's not uncommon for somebody under the age of 21 to be married and in the service. And that single, the wife at home, who's almost like a single mom if they have kids at that point, has a tremendous burden. And we shouldn't add to her burden that she cannot defend herself and her kids when her husband is deployed. Yet that is what raising the age to purchase a modern long rifle or shotgun is going to do. Already, if you're under the age of 21, you cannot buy a handgun from an FFL. Well, in the case of a military spouse whose husband is deployed, maybe she could get a shotgun or a rifle, which wouldn't quite be as effective as a handgun, but at least it's something. But what we're telling that mom at home is you got to buy a single-shot 22. You've got to buy a shotgun whose design is 150 years old if you want to protect your family at home while your spouse is deployed. Now you may say, well, military, they've got a lot of buddies. Surely there's a guy who's not deployed, who's a friend of the guy who's deployed, who's willing to buy a firearm and give it to the spouse at home. Guess what? That's not going to work after this bill passes, because it's not an uncle or a niece or a stepchild. There's not that family relation. And so if somebody tries to help the single mom at home whose husband is deployed by giving her a firearm, now she's guilty of gun trafficking under this bill. The buddy giving the firearm to her is guilty of gun trafficking under this bill. And ultimately, what does she want to do? She just wants to protect her family while her husband is deployed, risking his life to protect the Constitution. She deserves the same protections as anybody else, regardless of the fact that she's started her family at age 18, 19, or 20. She should not be deprived of that right. So what my bill says, or my amendment, it amends the underlying bill. Right now, the underlying bill raises the age to purchase a semi-automatic long gun or shotgun from 18 to 21. But it says if you're a member of the armed forces on active duty, then you're exempt from this. My amendment's simple. It just says if you're a spouse of a member of the armed forces on active duty, you're also exempt from this. And before my colleagues on the other side of the aisle say, oh, well, a young mom could never use a firearm to defend her family, I've got a story here of an Oklahoma woman killed an intruder, called 911. She would not let the intruder into her home. Her husband wasn't in the military, but in a very similar situation. He had died of cancer, and the community knew it. When members of the military are deployed, the community knows it. It's a point of pride for the community that somebody in that community is over there and serving the country and their community. But there are people who would take advantage of that knowledge, knowing that there's a single mom at home, like this person did in Oklahoma when the husband died of cancer and the community knew it. But this mother was able to defend herself and her baby with a firearm And we should not deprive anybody of that right, and that's what my amendment does. It protects that right. And I yield back.
Center fired. Does the gentlelady insist on a point of order?
I do not insist on my point of order.